Okay, so I'm going to take on the challenge of trying to implement a Mekko chart, which I don't even really know what that is, in Weweb. Here it is, a challenge from Casey Hemingway saying he wants to use this Mekko chart, which I can find out more about by clicking over here, and there's the Anychart documentation, which talks about what Mekko charts are and what components we would need in order to get going. So we're going to need to have a couple of components installed in our Weweb. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into Weweb, and I'm going to just say, so sign up with Google, fine. Sign in. Don't care. And then we will have our Weweb, and we're just going to create a project, blank project. And name is going to be Mekko test. All right, and I'll say create. Great. So we got a Mekko test, and we're just right now going to have pretty much nothing in it. We're going to just sort of see what we can do. The first thing I noticed is that the Mekko chart is going to require a couple of script tags, and so I'm going to copy those two script tags over to the StateChange Weweb Embed converter. And the way we use that is we can just paste in these two tags, and we convert them into a Weweb JavaScript action, which I will copy, and then go over to my test. And on the page home load event, so we go to workflows, add a workflow. So on page load, in fact, for early add, we're going to say, let's pick a custom JavaScript. And we're going to edit the code, and we're just going to paste in what we got from the Weweb Embed converter. This will bring all of that Anychart stuff about the Mekko charts into the current context. Fantastic. So now we have ourselves this. Let's go take a look again. Let's close up with the workflow, and now we have ourselves the field again, right? We go back and learn about more how to use the Mekko chart. And the Mekko chart is going to wants us to create a Mekko chart, and that is fine, which is going to need to have a certain amount of data to it, which means we're going to have to do some JavaScript in here, which is going to use anychart.mekko. Anychart should exist at that point. But the trick is we need to know how to attach it to something that is on the DOM. We'll get more into what the data can be, and etc. So let's go over to the quick start, and we will learn more about the quick start for Anychart, where we can have a container. That's fine. And then, okay, it says Anychart can do an on-document load event. We're not going to worry about that part yet because we can control our own workflows from Weweb, but we can create a chart, and we can set data, and then we can draw it, and we'll be able to set what the container is. The container is set via ID. Okay, that's cool. So what we can do now is go back over to Weweb and say that there's going to be a div that's going to need to hold all this. That's going to be we're just going to need to add an element to it. So let's say we're going to do a plus here, and we want to get a div. Whoop, there's div. And here we should have our div. Our div can have, we're not going to change anything about it except to go set its ID. And we're going to set it to Mekko container because we're going to use that in code. And so now what we want to do is probably add another, I'm going to add a button to do this because I think it'll just make it a little bit easier to understand. Because buttons can be, we'll have it create the button label, the text in the button, and then we'll say this is a setup chart. Make chart. Okay, and then we'll be able to attach to the workflow, add workflow, and we will say add an action. And again, we'll just do a custom JavaScript action because why not? Now, because we previously loaded in the Mekko stuff, what should happen here is we should be able to go to go back over to here and have something that looks like this stuff. And we'll say copy, and we will go back over to Mekko test, and we'll say, all right, let's try pasting that stuff. And it's going to go to the Mekko container because that's the idea of the container that we set up. And we're just going to go tell it to draw a pie chart with the silly stuff in it and not worry too much more, just base case. Let's close it up, and we will say close. And cool, let's put this in preview mode and see what happens. So we go to make chart, and nothing happens. So we go over to our dev tools, and we find out what happened here. Anything interesting? Anychart is not defined, it says. Okay, all right. So let's refresh the page. Sometimes we need to refresh the pages in order for things to work properly for us. And All right, and we will go over here and we'll say make chart. And it says pie charts not supported in this module. That's a much better error message for us to see, because it implies we just didn't load the pie chart, we only loaded the Mekko chart, which is probably correct, because that's all we told to do. Because when we went to the Mekko chart documentation, the first thing it told us was download core and download Mekko, probably didn't download any of the pie stuff. Okay, so let's have it use this Mekko chart, my Mekko, and we will go back over to here and click on the button. We'll go back to the editor again, and we will click on the button, and we will go here, and we will say workflow, custom JavaScript, edit the code, and you say instead of saying the chart is going to be equal to anychart.py, we're just going to say it's equal to anychart.mekko. And I'm just going to comment that part out for a second and say this is not anything that's all that interesting. So now we're just going to add a Mekko chart, give it a title. I don't know if that'll actually work. Set it to the Mekko container and draw it. Let's see if that works. And we will close that up and preview and make chart. And it says chart is not defined. Why is chart not defined? And we will go back over to the pencil and we will click on this and we will click on the workflow and here and the chart. I need to actually say var chart, because that's a JavaScript thing. Whenever you reference a variable for the first time, you need to put the word var or let or something in front of it. And that's the reason it was complaining here. So let's close this up again and close this up again and put this in the preview and click on make chart. Oh, hey, look, I'm starting to get a chart. There's something here. We're not done yet, but there's something here now. So the next thing we're going to do is go over to the Mekko chart and learn more about it. So all I did was say create a Mekko chart, and then we want to create an example. So let's try putting in some data. There's also a mosaic version of this in here that we could use, but whatever. And hey, look at this. We have this data that we could use in here. I don't see where series data 1 is coming from. We can create a data set, a series data 1, data map as. Okay, it seems like there's some stuff in here. So let's just grab this stuff for a second and we'll copy that. In fact, what we'll do is say we're going to probably just copy over all this stuff, because this all looks really interesting. We'll make chart out of all this. So let's go over to our Mekko test and we will go to our pencil and we will click on the button again and go to the lightning bolt and go to the workflow and go into the custom JavaScript and go to the JavaScript. And we still like the title of the container and the draw. So let's paste this stuff into here. We'll say this is the raw data we're working with, and series data 1, 2. Like we talked about before, there needs to be a var in front of the word chart, and they didn't like to do that in their examples. I'm not sure why. And otherwise, this stuff down here is the same as what we had before, so it seems fine. So we'll close this up, and we'll close this up, and we will press play, and we'll run make chart. Oh, hey, look. That looks much more promising. It also doesn't look quite right. It looks like there are a couple of different, it looks like we copied it twice into here. So let's just refresh this page for a second and see if it works better. And we'll do make chart and here and click on the eyeball so we can preview, and we're going to make chart. And it says the feature of Mekko chart is not available from this module, cannot read of defined reading Mekko. So I'm just going to do a refresh of the page. And we're going to go to the eyeball and create chart. Oh, hey, look, gave us everything we wanted. And we have the tops and bottoms and 2 different views and all the preview stuff that it gives us. And then a reasonable question is, okay, what's then the simple fashion? It's like we have this just in a div. So can we control the size of the div if we're sitting inside Weweb? And I think the answer is yes. So we go back over to here and we say, okay, here's my div, which is the whole thing. And right now it's set to flex. But what if we said that the sizing is going to be centered and we're going to set its width not to 100%, but to, I don't know, let's set it to 400 pixels. And then what I did up here was establish it would be centered versus left aligned versus aligned. So you can put the chart really wherever you want, because now it's just being wrapped inside this div and can be laid out around everything else. Yeah, so far so good. So we can do other layout things with that. The other big consideration, though, is going to be where's the data supposed to come from? And so we can click into the button here and change up its workflow. And okay, it's going to run custom JavaScript. We need custom JavaScript to get this work done. But probably the bigger deal here is we're going to need this data. And it would probably stand to reason we could get data from like a variable if we wanted to, or from a collection, right? This looks like a good candidate for getting from a collection of data. But let's just say we're going to get all this data here is going to exist in I'm just going to copy that for a second, and I'm going to say this is going to exist in a variable. So let's go create a variable that's going to store the stuff, and that way we can start to talk about how we map this into the way that it can compose into the rest of Weweb without having to go build a whole lot of external components. And we will go to up here where it says data and variables. We're going to add a page level variable, and it's going to be, let's call it data. And the default value is going to be this stuff here, and the type of it is going to be this so far, it looks like it's just an array. Let's have it be an array. Great. And the value is going to be all this stuff. It's an array of arrays. So far, so good. It doesn't really like the fact that all this data is in here. If I made it into an object, would that work? It also says invalid. It's an array. An array of what? I don't know. And this something that's more complicated like this, it does not appear to really want to handle. Query? No. Array. And we will say that is all, well, you know what, we'll say it doesn't have a default value at all. Okay. Sorry, and variables, and great, fine. So now we have something called data. So what we're going to do now is say we're going to create a new, text field, and we'll create the text field, a form, a long answer text field here, and we're going to call it, let's see, instead of calling it, in fact, you know what, let's be better about this. Let's add from input and controls a long answer, more sophisticated thing. That way we can have not just a description. We're going to say this is just going to contain the JSON, because why not? JSON for the chart. And this is going to be, or we can just enter a description, and the description is going to start with data in here. The text is going to be not sanitized, no typography, nothing. What's the value in here? And over here, the input type, the initial value is going to be this stuff. It's going to be the actual JSON for it. And I think that should do okay. And then, so now what this sets us up to do is say this text here we're going to turn into JSON that we're going to use in the chart. I'm just going to grab this button up here. I'm going to also say this guy over here that he really has permission from where I sit from a layout point of view to live here in the middle, if he wants to. Maybe he doesn't, that's fine. And then this guy here is going to be the chart button is going to set up the data for that chart, not based on this, but based on long answer value. Except we're going to need to actually cast that into JSON in order for that to work, because it needs to be turned into a data structure. Obviously, you'd probably get this from like backend data or something instead of using this technique, but it allows us to illustrate how we can modify this. And then it's going to set up with the Mekko and clear and draw. And I'm just going to quickly ask about the draw function here. And draw a function basics. No, I don't really know what that is. Okay, if I say an overview, I'm not really sure what that's going to do either. And if I just go back to a quick start, the quick start just says it would create it in the container and chart dot draw. And I'm not sure what else I would do here. Container, draw. This doesn't seem to have anything about how to clear them. Oh, there's the JavaScript API reference down there. And I'm going to say, what's my chart basic API, Mekko, create a Mekko, and it creates a chart, and that will contain the chart data, which is fine. And then I'll just draw. What do I just say up here? Draw. Is there a draw method in here? Fascinating that there's just not, which is very weird. And no charts. We're sort of looking around, seeing if there's anything else that's like related to a base case of how this thing works. The functions overview. These are all the functions we can do off of Anychart. Anychart will allow us to create a Mekko. The Mekko will actually return a chart class. So it returns Anychart charts Mekko, which is fine, and it extends the chart class. Okay, and then the methods are going to include controls and data and the export stuff, interactivity, and how you're going to associate it. All sorts of neat things on here, and I'm going to just here is draw. Great. And if I say I want to draw, basically it was draw what I want to do it asynchronously. I'm not sure how much that matters. And then is there a clear move? Remove all series. Okay, this creates potential that we might be able to clean up after ourselves. But let's just try out here, going back over to the Anychart custom plugin. We will try, we're here in my Weweb, and I've just got my data. I'm just going to see if I can get this thing to run with that particular data. All right, let's just try refreshing the page. And I'm just going to say my chart. Oh, right, I gotta click in preview mode. I go to my chart. And it doesn't like that. It does not like that at all. It says ... 3000. Okay, that's clearly I did something wrong. Let's find out what that was. So I go back into here. All of this stuff seems fine. So I go to the lightning bolt, go to workflow, go into here, click on the JavaScript, and say what does not like about my data. And in data set variables, right? This guy. And sure looks like it's going to have all of this data inside it. So let's just do a console.log of data of, well, actually it seems like this is crashing out here, so it's not able to actually do that. So let's find out what's going on by introducing a console.log of this particular variable. And the easiest way to do that actually is to copy the variable here. So copy, and we're going to go over here to the dev tools over here, which you can get to by doing right click and click inspect. That's how I got here before. And I can do paste. wlib.variables. Well, we're not going to work too much more about that. So let's just say if we just get variables here, we're going to say do this hard way and click on that, copy, and then we're going to say paste, and we're going to say console.log and close, and we'll just give this a go and let's find out what it has to say. So let's close this, and we will do eyeball and click make chart, and then it'll tell us that this stuff all looks like ding, everything looks fine. So it says unexpected token. So it doesn't like this formatted as it is as JSON. Open, close, fine. Open, close, fine. Open, close, fine. Open, close, fine. It has a comma at the end. I wonder if the comma at the end is the crux of the problem here. Let's try it again. Oh, there it was. So sometimes it's just about identifying weird things, and this is why you want to let more of the no-code tools handle this for you. But what if we wanted this to be something other than 16,500? What if we wanted this to be 12,000? How about 120,000? Let's make it big. And then This becomes 120,000. And you can see it's also adding it on. And clearly the draw into the same div is not exactly what we wanted it to do. So we're going to need to introduce some more functionality in order to be able to make that work a little more properly. So let's click into here again. We're going to go into here again. We're going to say, let's just clear the div. And the way we would clear the div is we can go into, we'd probably just have the button, and we would go back into here and edit this. And at this point, no, we don't need to console log this out anymore. That's fine. And we're getting the data now dynamically from there, and that works correctly. However, the question is whether or not the chart, right, already exists. So what I'm going to propose we do is we're going to say window.chart equals chart. See, in JavaScript, in a browser-based application, your window, the whole the thing that surrounds, is considered global. Everybody has access to it, all those little code bits. And so you can use just a little bit of code to say, let's remember this chart by putting it into the top level. We can also put it into a Weweb variable or something, but one of the things about Weweb is that it makes sure you're never actually leaving the page. That's why some of the page transitions can be so good. So we can say also if window.chart is not, basically if it exists, right? Then basically let's go clean it up. And we'll say window.chart.remove all series. And because that's something we just learned about over here, where we have remove all series. And so we'll say we'll remove all the series before we do that, and then we'll just say, let's go to town. And then that way we keep on, and then we'll say window.chart equals undefined. And then basically what we forget about the old chart, we get the new chart, we get to keep on turning this particular wheel. So that's what we're doing with that. And we will say close, and we will say eyeball that, and let's make the chart. And okay, so it's clearing the previous chart, but it's not actually removing the previous chart from the container. So I'm just going to ask if there's a clear button or something I can do to remove. Cancel. Is there anything like a clear? Remove all series. Okay, so what it looks to me like is that probably there are two different concerns we need to do. Like one is going to be adding the chart, and the other is going to be replacing the series that are sitting on the chart in order for it to work properly. So let's consider those step by step. When we're in here, we could say, let's I've got my button, right? My button's going to initialize my chart. I'm going to go into the custom JavaScript, fine, and let's separate the concerns. All right. So one concern here is that I'm creating a chart out of stuff, right? Or creating data, right? This is what this top part here is. And then I'm clearing this, which is probably not the most important part. But then there's I'm creating a chart using Mekko. I'm going to set certain information about it, and then I want it to draw. So what I think I probably want to try doing instead, we're going to say if bang if window if a bang means not. So if it doesn't exist, window.chart, and we will say here, okay, then we're going to create new chart, and we're going to just say, I'm going to space these in because it makes it easy to read, and then underneath that we'll say after that we're going to bar chart equals window.chart. That way we're making sure we're always referencing that global chart. So we're saying if there's not already a global chart, we add it. Otherwise, we don't, and we're going to set up our data, and that's all going to look fantastic. And then we're going to say chart.remove all series so we can clear it out each time. That way we're staying up to date. Maybe we'll do fancier things for animations, but right now this stays relatively simple. So we'll say close it up, and we'll say close that up, and we will say let's refresh the page, just to reboot all of these drawn things that are in here and say what happens if we start from a clear environment. And then I'll say make the chart. And here I have to go into the preview mode in order to try it. And it says it is not valid. JSON. Oh, that's because I didn't properly remove this thing second time through. So I'm going to click that. All right, now. Oh, look at that. It updates the chart. 2,000. Oh, look how tiny it is. And now I can add something else, which is going to be 16,000. It's properly updating things as I update the JSON for the chart. So you can be getting things from the database and just using this sort of update. And rather than setting up this action to be associated with the button, you could have it come through like a collection that you set up and have that collection keep on feeding through. And then as you update the collection, that's what the actual chart gets bound to. Now, you can also create more code to use to create like a Vue.js component that will then allow you to manage more of the attributes in here using the no-code control plane, right? Like getting more of this stuff as opposed to just being able to relate to the outside container. But what this can do, is what I've demonstrated in 28 minutes, is you can use a few tools and a little bit of JavaScript to get Weweb to work with something as arbitrary as a chart that you've never seen before, the Mekko chart from Anycharts, by using Weweb, by using a little bit of our Embed converter from StateChange, and then getting this stuff going. And making more of this stuff going relatively fast is exactly the kind of thing we do when we focus on the hardest 5% of problems over at StateChange. And we have a suite of tools, of community, as well as daily office hours where we really just focus on hard problems like this and trying to help people ship meaningful projects faster. And I hope that this video has helped you maybe get a little closer to being able to ship your Weweb and visual chart-based project a little quicker as well. See ya.